I've been thinking about these council elections recently, and I'll be honest, I've never really engaged with council elections before, and I think a lot of people were in the same position. But I've been thinking about them recently and what difference they actually make. So I had a bit of a dive to see what I could find out. And what I did find was quite interesting. But before I get to that, I just want to make clear that I'm not here to push any party or their agenda. I'm not interested in any conspiracy theories or Machiavellian plots. No straw men, no exaggerations, no affiliation. I want to understand how this works and what effect it actually has on us without using hyperbole. What I can tell you is that everything is extremely complicated, and there is always more to the information that we get blasted with through the media, through politicians and social media influencers. Now, I'm not a fancy know-it-all channel that doesn't really tell you anything anyway, but somehow you end up on some sort of mailing list. All I aim to do is question and investigate these narratives and jargon-filled talking points and share what I find. And I hope that you'll all do the same. Right then, so council elections are actually one of the places where your individual vote carries the most weight, as voter turnout is usually low, so a small number of motivated people can genuinely change outcomes, unlike in general elections. So what does a council actually do? Councils are essentially a form of local government responsible for your area. And by that, I mean things that directly affect your daily life, like how and when your bins get collected, and getting potholes and deteriorating roads fixed, and whether a planning application gets approved. There is also allocation and management of social housing, and a big one, social care, is also within the remit of councils, who are responsible for delivering services and controlling the allocation of funding. Councillors don't always do these things directly. A lot is contracted out or delivered by permanent staff. But councillors are the ones who set the priorities, hold the budget, and carry the accountability when things go wrong. I'll do deeper dives on several different areas within a council later on, because these topics deserve their own space. But the short version is, with social housing, that the council's main role is mainly around waiting lists, allocation policy and planning decisions. Also, much of the old council housing stock has actually been transferred to independent housing associations over the years, or into private ownership under the government's right to buy scheme. Now, councils are structured into areas, the areas are called small zones, and they're actually called wards. And each ward elects a councillor to represent it, like how an MP is elected to a constituency. Also, like MPs, councillors are temporarily elected representatives, but the actual work of the council is carried out by a permanent body of staff known as officers, much like the civil service, or as some may refer to, the blob. So the councillors set the direction and approve the budget. The staff deliver it. Think of it less like a politician personally fixing your road and more like a board of directors overseeing a management team. Now, with the parties, I found it quite interesting because one of the most common reasons for voting in council elections is essentially to treat them as a popularity poll on the national parties, which mean that the actual local decisions often get drowned out by national politics. This matters because a lot of candidates lean heavily on party branding to get elected, and sometimes a party will place a candidate in a ward specifically to project their brand there, rather than because that person is the best person for the job. But here's something that really surprised me. I couldn't find a meaningful direct link between which party controls your council and which party is governing in Westminster. So what can a councillor actually do? Your councillor wears two hats. Locally, they represent your ward. They're the person you contact when something isn't working in your area. But they're also a member of the full council, sitting on committees that make decisions across the whole borough on things like planning applications, budget allocations, But what they cannot do, regardless of which hat they're wearing, is touch anything that sits with central government. They're generally unable to override national policies, and if a candidate is making such proposals, such as those in party policy on the national level, such as immigration or renationalisation, that's potentially a red flag. Additionally, be wary of anyone offering simple solutions to complex problems, especially by talking about being tougher or implying that those in post are too soft. In theory, it sounds decisive, but think about it from an office politics perspective. Imagine you've worked somewhere for a few years and suddenly this new boss arrives and starts telling everybody that they haven't been working hard enough and things are going to change. How would that land with you? The permanent staff who actually run the council were there before your councillor arrived, and they'll be there after they leave. Getting things done requires working with that structure, not against it. Now, things may often seem to take longer than expected, but that's, to be honest, most of the time because of mismanaged expectations, especially about how these processes actually work. So when this happens, it becomes formal complaint territory, but I'll do a completely standalone video on that later. Now, on accountability, we need to get better at holding our representatives to account, because right now, most political discourse kind of suggests that we don't really know how to do that. What we tend to get instead is a cycle of criticism that nothing is happening fast enough, or blame games from previous administrations, followed by calls of resignation at the first sign of a mistake. That's not accountability, that's just making noise. There's a lot more to political engagement than listening to the news every day and voting in a general election every 5 years. So it might be worth paying attention if you want the best for your country and your community. So there are a couple of things to look out for when you go to choose. When you're looking at a candidate, there are a few things worth checking beyond the party label. If they're already a sitting councillor, their attendance record and voting history are public. Your council's website will have meeting minutes and recorded votes. Have they actually shown up? Have they raised issues specific to your ward? Or have they been invisible between elections? If they're a challenger, look for evidence of genuine local involvement, not just appearing at election time, but community groups, planning campaigns, resident associations, charity work, anything that suggests they were invested in the area before they wanted your vote. I just want to mention a couple of websites that are worth knowing about. The first is whocanivotefor.co.uk, run by a non-partisan organisation called Democracy Club. You put in your postcode and it tells you exactly who's standing in your ward, sometimes with candidate statements. The second is your local council's own website, which will have public records of meeting attendance and voting history for sitting councillors. And if you want to check or update your registration details for future elections, that's at gov.co.uk/register to vote, because obviously that deadline's passed. The last thing I have to say is regarding tactical voting, because this is where it often gets interesting. Tactical voting is when you vote not for who you actually want, but to keep someone else out. And while the logic can sometimes be understandable, particularly in the first past the post system, the problem is that it often means voting for a candidate you know very little about, or aren't even impressed with at all, basing your vote purely on who they aren't perceived to be. Remember, you don't know these people, they aren't your friends, they just want the power that you give them, especially at a council level where the individual matters more than the party. That's a significant trade-off, because you could end up with someone in post for 4 years whose actual record and capabilities you never looked at, simply because their tie was the right colour to block someone else. It's worth at least knowing who you're voting for, even if the tactical calculation is the reason why you're voting. I think that just about covers everything that I want to in this video. thank you for watching. As I mentioned earlier, I will be doing more about grounded political stories, not dramatic representations like what you find in the media. We need to start bringing politics back into being a bit more sensible, I think, and it's going to start on this channel. So if you liked what you saw here today, then please make sure that you like and subscribe and all that kind of thing, and I'll see you in the next one.